All right, I think we're gonna get started, everybody. Thank you for coming down and thank you for everybody joining online.
Yeah.
We have Jared Thomas and Ben Keppel with us here today. So I'm gonna ask everybody that's online, if you have a question, please drop that in the chat. We will also be putting some links in the chat as well. Feel free to ask questions. That's what we're here for. So I'll turn it over to Ben and Jared.
Sure. So the folks here over RDC asked if we could come down and do an overview of our programs coming up for project year 2024. And we've got some applications due in June. We'll talk about the budget later and if that might change things from the feds. But we'll get there later. So yeah, so they're great enough to ask if we can get some people together in person, and they offer to do this online as well for future reference in case we need that. So that's been great. We're also going to hold a similar version of this. I'll say an extended version of this next Wednesday. And we can send out a link to that as well if we need to for the group. So that'll cover everything we talk about here. We're also going to talk about how to enter the application itself in Ocean if you're brand new to that. If you've been doing this for a while, you probably don't need to watch that part of the webinar, but you can feel free to do so. Like you guys are probably fine with that. But we're going to hold that next week. We'll post after that on our technical assistance site. We'll post that version of our webinar that we're doing statewide on that website. So if you need to go back and reference something, we'll put the PowerPoint on there as well if you need to reference anything. And then we're at the end of today's webinar, we'll have contact info for all of our program staff for our programs as well. If you need to contact me or anybody else, probably me in our case, but yeah. All right. This isn't a long PowerPoint show or anything. Don't worry about that. So I just wanted to do an overview of what is going to be available for applications in June and after that as well. And some timelines for the applications itself. And then if you get a grant, the timeline for those as well. Then we're going to cover some general application tips we see every year, and then just at the end some quick resources for everyone and links if you need them. And that's the Longaberger basket. Not in this territory, but it's Southern Ohio, so we'll take it. Yeah. Is that an office building? Did I hear about that? It is now. Okay. Couldn't remember what that was. So this, wow, I should have brought my glasses. No, I got it. It's fine. Yeah. Well, I don't know if we have the same script, but so this meeting, we're going to focus on these top 3 programs. So in June, these are the applications that will be due for those programs. The other 3 we'll cover briefly here. And then if you have specific questions on those types of projects or applications, feel free to reach out and we'll answer any questions. First one is our allocation program. That's, by the way, this is for our state CDBG funding. Maybe I should have started with that here. That's what this funding is. So the first program I wanted to mention is our allocation program. That's a formula program we have based on the LMI population or low and moderate income population of each county. I've already reached out to, our counties and some cities get that funding every 2 years from us. So there are some people in the room that applied for that funding last year. And then the other people that are due to apply for that funding for this year in June, I've already reached out to them. Those are 5 counties within this. No, never mind. I've already reached out to them. And then that program is, in general, if it's eligible, if it's a CDBG eligible project, within some additional parameters we have in our consolidated plan that we'll link to at the end of this, then in general will allow that. It's not a competitive program or anything. It's just if it's eligible and it meets our guidelines, then it will be approved. And that's every 2 years for each of our direct grantees that we deal with. So in addition to that, so all those grantees that are eligible to apply for that allocation funding, we also have a neighborhood revitalization program that's also applied for on a 2-year cycle. Pretty much, we allow all of our allocation grantees to apply for additional neighborhood revitalization funding. So the grant cap on that is $750,000. You can take a certain amount of that for administrative costs, and then the rest you can use for construction or anything else with the grant. So CDBG can fund a bunch of different activities. But for this program, we're looking for one target area that qualifies as low or moderate income. And with that, we're looking for at least 3 different activities within the grant that when you put them all together, there's some type of comprehensive or cohesive impact in that target area. So they qualify as low and moderate income, or LMI, I'll just say it from now on. And also in that program, there's some type of outreach to the people in your target area to try to figure out what their needs are and what's available in our program and how we can make those 2 things merge together. So a lot of people that apply for that neighborhood revitalization funding, they already have started some kind of process or works with engaging residents there. If you want to apply for this funding and you haven't considered that already, you can talk to us. We'll help you through that. So that's the neighborhood revitalization program in a nutshell. We'll get to a couple more things with that in a few minutes. And then the last program that's going to be due for applications in June, it's our critical infrastructure project or program. That is, the grant cap for that is $500,000. This is meant for high priority, what we call single purpose infrastructure. I guess some examples would be flood and drainage. There's excessive flooding in your service area for the grant, or like a bridge might be out that's vital to the area. I would say we've done some street improvements with that grant. We've done some water line projects, even replacing lead line. It's pretty much you're saying, hey, this one piece of infrastructure needs to be repaired. There's impact to the people in the area. And then there's also, I'll say a clear like cause and effect relationship to what's wrong in your area. We make these infrastructure improvements, and then the people benefiting from that there's some kind of positive impact there. Things we wouldn't do with this program would be more like a comprehensive kind of repair, like you've got a road out here, you want to do sidewalks, you want to do flood and drainage, you want to completely repair the street, and you want to do several other things around that one street. That's why we say single purpose. So you need to fix your water line, because then that's where in the application you identify why the need is there. That's what we're looking for. We have got some questions about, hey, we'll stick with the water line example, because why not? We're replacing the water line, but hey, we got to tear up the street. So can we repair the street while we're digging up that road? Sure. We ask people to do that with the other funding and not the CDBG grant funding. Just because we want the grant funding to be for that one single purpose. So that's what we mean by critical infrastructure. And then we'll get into a couple more things as far as how those applications are rated. And yeah, we'll do that in a couple minutes. So those are the 3 programs. that we'll accept applications for in June. I guess if we have questions, for the people online, feel free to throw those in the chat. And then the people in the room here, you can feel free to ask questions as we go. And then the other programs we have that our team deals with, we have a residential public infrastructure program. That essentially is a water sewer program. It's public drinking water, a sanitary sewer. These are usually large scale, multi-million dollar projects. That's what we usually see. It doesn't have to be, but it usually ends up being that way. We do have a tentative floor for that program of $100,000. We have a max cap on that program of $750,000. And for this program, we also do allow household connections to water sewer line. There's also a caveat in the CDBG program. If you're requiring an LMI household to connect to that new water sewer or improved water sewer line, either new or improved, then you got to pay for that connection to the public water sewer line. So we do allow those household connections as a part of that residential public infrastructure program. And we'll start accepting pre-applications for that July 1st. And then that is what we call an open cycle program. So we'll accept applications until the money's out, pretty much. And then so anything that's not due in June, we'll accept on a rolling basis until we run out of funding. But we also do require you to, once you do start the application itself in Ocean, we'll give you 60 days to finish it, pretty much. So yeah, that's our water sewer program or residential public infrastructure. After that, we have what we call a flexible grant program. That is pretty much a catch-all for anything that doesn't fit in our other CDBG programs. Anything that you could use your allocation funding for, especially, or if you could apply for the other programs, we're going to ask for you to apply for those programs instead of this flexible grant program. And then also for the grantees who have revolving loan fund accounts, if you have anything in that account, we're going to ask you to substantially disperse that account first. That's program income that would have been generated from one of our other grant programs, most likely the economic development one. So yeah, so the flexible program that includes work on downtown buildings. And then you can also just reach out if you have any other projects that don't fit cleanly in the programs we have. Oh, okay. And then the last program we wanted to touch on, our other open cycle program, is the economic development program. So the other ones above that, usually, I'm going to say this in a very general manner, usually qualify as area-wide LMI benefit. So it's either a village, township, or even just the people on a single street, something like that. Usually they qualify as the area qualifies as LMI, and that's how we qualify those projects in the 5 programs above that. Economic development, this is the benefit of business. So there is an LMI benefit component to that, but it's job creation usually. Sometimes job retention. That's a narrower case for HUD compared to other agencies, especially ARC that we deal with a lot in this region. So that we can do a loan to a business that they repay back. That could be for fixed assets, like we see a lot of machinery and equipment, major machinery purchases. That's one example. We're expanding a facility to produce new product lines, which in turn, they create jobs to get that assistance, and then the business repays that back. We do have another component where they can get assistance for offsite public infrastructure. Good example would be if a business has a lot of truck traffic and they need to build out a new road for that truck traffic. We've seen that quite a bit with this program, or extending municipal utilities to a site where a company moves in and they say, hey, we need more water capacity for our products. And then, so that's how that would fit in with the economic development program as well. And we have a cap on that program of $500,000. So instead of that LMI area benefit for residents, it's a commercial benefit where there's job creation, and over, or at least 51% of those jobs are qualified as LMI at hiring, not after they're hired. Or I guess being interviewed is what I'll say. Do we have any questions in general on our programs yet, Sam?
Back to the flexible program, and maybe this will be part of the training, I don't know yet. Could you give me a perfect storm scenario that we could access that for downtown building?
Yeah. So yeah, with the downtown funding, we can do at least one building with that, or we allow up to 3 buildings for that program. And it can be, usually we see it as some type of code enforcement repairs to the building, or there's some type of repairs that need to be done to the foundation or other like critical parts of the building, not necessarily cosmetic or buying furniture or fixture, anything like that for the building owner or the company there. Usually we see things like repairing walls, or HVAC, or it's an abandoned building and it wants to get, and a new owner wants to get it fixed up to start a business there or expand. So that's how that would qualify under that program.
And it could be private ownership?
Yes. It usually is for that.
And has anyone ever used this in conjunction with the Jobs Ohio program escaping Tammy,
The inclusion grant,
not that inclusion.
vibrant communities.
Thank you, vibrant communities program.
I don't know. I'd have to check. I haven't seen it. Have you seen it?
I don't think so. The only projects that we usually have in conjunction with Jobs Ohio are actual economic development projects, but it doesn't mean that it's precluded. We just have to do a little bit of research.
Does that happen? Yeah.
Go get them, Sam.
Oh, I have harassed Jared and Ben for years on, if I have an idea, they're gonna.
I would use the word harass, but I mean, it is part of our job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff comes up that we have to do a little bit of digging into, especially now with a lot of the new programs that are coming online with the state. We just don't know the whole universe yet.
All right, yeah, I think we can move on then. So yeah, now we wanted to get a little bit into the scoring and minimum requirements for the competitive programs due in, or applications due in June. So yeah, the neighborhood revitalization program and critical infrastructure. So at a bare minimum, I mean, with anything CDBG related, it needs to meet one of these, what HUD calls a national objective. So in this case, your area qualifies as low and moderate income. Sam, for the downtown buildings, that would qualify as a slum and blight project. We're not qualifying with either the ACS data, or if you do an income survey of your service area, that's, you're identifying at least one thing in that building to be blighted, or HUD's word is substandard, where at least some part of the building needs to be repaired because it's not in working condition.
From the slum and blight perspective, can these funds be used to help a community or a community stakeholder purchase an asset?
We don't do
As part of a larger. package.
Yeah, we wouldn't do acquisition under the downtown program. The funds are solely for bringing those buildings up to standard. And the only program that we do acquisition in is actually the economic development program again, so.
Yeah, for the downtown programs, we do require some form of site control as part of the application. Okay. Outer space. But yeah, we do require the ownership or proof of ownership with the application itself. With the economic development program, yeah, we've seen that in some cases, but it's usually acquisition plus an activity.
Right.
So it's usually, in that case, acquisition plus construction. We don't really deal with acquisition itself, because each activity, no matter what, in this funding has to have some kind of beneficiary at the end. So speculative projects or land banking, we don't really do that, because you wouldn't have an end user or end beneficiary at the end of it. So I guess we could go back to the neighborhood program here.
I think we have two questions online. Shannon, do
Okay.
you have two?
Yes. I've got, he just says prevailing wage. I'm not for sure what he means, but then the other one is, would sidewalks in front of downtown commercial buildings be eligible for a flexible grant?
So your first question, prevailing wage, that's in reference to Davis-Bacon wages or federal prevailing wages. Yeah, that with the CDBG program, any construction project pretty much requires federal prevailing wages. Technically, the dollar amount threshold is $2,000. That was set back in the 30s. So we just tell people any construction project pretty much requires federal prevailing wages, using CDBG funding, of course. And then second question, sorry, sidewalks.
In front of commercial buildings.
So yeah, with the flexible program, it's for downtown buildings. We don't do downtown streetscaping or infrastructure like that with the downtown buildings portion of that program. It's specifically for the building repair.
I think that's it.
All right. So yeah, so with the neighborhood program, it has to be that national objective of LMI area benefit. That's either with using the ACS data that we use, or you're doing an income survey. If that ACS data says your area is not 51% or more LMI. And then the other minimum threshold of this program is some type of community participation. What does that mean? And then we're gonna say, you tell us, because everyone engages residents completely different in this program. We've seen every year. So however you're getting input from the residents to identify their needs and what they want in their community, it's up to you to show us what you've done and what kind of results you've gotten from that. And however you want to do that, we'll take it, as long as some kind of proof is in there in the application. Then after that, our rating criteria, we'll go over that. This is out of 100 points. The bulk of it is in what we call program design. So how did you pick the activities that you're applying for? What's the impact on the current conditions of whatever you're wanting to install, replace, and repair, etc. What's the impact of that on the residents now versus what's the impact on all that on the residents after everything's done? That's the bulk of that scoring. Community participation, yeah, that's how strong of a response you've gotten from your area. Or also, it's not just quantity, I'll say it's also quality, like what type of questions are you asking? What type of response are you getting compared to how you're reaching out? And then the last little bit is what we call just implementation and admin capacity. So as in, you're the applicant, are you familiar with some of the string or all the strings that are attached with this, such as prevailing wage or federal prevailing wages? Good question there. And then also if we've had to deal with any major findings for other grants with the community and the administrator in the past. At the end of this webinar, we'll link to our consolidated plan. It's where we have, a few more bullet points or sentences on each of those categories. If you want to reference exactly what we're talking about with the rating criteria with that. Something we have started this year for all of our applications that's not the allocation program is having a minimum score. So we're now saying for everything we do except for the allocation program, that the application needs to have a minimum score for our rating system of 51. That doesn't necessarily mean if you get a 51, you're automatically funded, because it just means that you could rate high enough to be selected for funding. It just depends on how many applications we get and the quality of those and the amount of money we have. Frankly, a lot of these programs we have are competitive just on the scarcity of the funds themselves, because ultimately we would love to fund as much stuff as we could. But yeah, we're just dealing with limited funds and increasing demand. All right, I think we can move on. I'm gonna take a drink of water. And we'll have, so, Carrie, you said you're gonna put this on your website as well? Okay. So yeah, folks, this will be on the OVRDC website as well, and this info plus more, we're gonna cover next week on our statewide webinar, and that version will also be posted on the technical assistance site, and we'll send an email blast with a link to that and everything to everyone later. So now for the critical infrastructure program, the minimum thresholds for this program are, once again, meeting that national objective, which most likely is that LMI area-wide benefit. There are a couple other instances where it could qualify as a different national objective, like slum and blight. I will say to reference the consolidated plan if you want a complete summary of all those different national objectives, but I will say in general, most of these projects qualify as some type of LMI area-wide benefit. It doesn't have to be an entire place or an entire village, township, city, etc. I mean, the size of the service area does not matter. This is rural Ohio, we know. So it could be just people on a single street or a single water line, or it could be an entire township or a village. However, it needs to qualify, and that will work. Readiness to proceed is another minimum threshold we have. In other words, is a shovel ready? Once you get your grant agreement and the funds are secured, is the project ready to move forward? A lot of people work with the Ohio EPA on this. So we do require, if you need a permit to install or any other kind of design work to be done, we do require that when you apply. And then the last thing we look for is some type of it says program impact up here. We say, is this a critical project in nature? So is the infrastructure, other words, is the infrastructure failing or is it about to fail? Rather than this being, rather than your application being about maintenance or like regular maintenance for something. So in the narratives and the application, we do ask questions about the criticality of the project and the current impact and the future benefit on the residents and the area. So that's what we're looking for with that program impact. Then rating criteria we use, the same thing with the neighborhood program implementation and administrative capacity. So are you able to carry out the project with the federal requirements? If you get a grant agreement from us, that's pretty much what that means. Program design, how critical is your project? What's the impact on the people currently? What's the benefit afterwards? Is there a clear cause and effect relationship between your proposed project and the need you've identified? That's the bulk of that program design category. And then your narratives on the current condition of the infrastructure and narratives and also supporting documentation, which I'm gonna touch on that later. So those are the rating criteria for both of those programs due in June. That's not the allocation program. We'll link to the consolidated plan at the end, if you want to get more language on each of those criteria for those programs. Any questions on those two programs so far?
Do any of them require match or is that
Oh,
just?
yeah, good question. We don't anymore. Yeah, so, all three of these programs due in June, no match required. It's not required and it's not part of the scoring.
What about the flexible, like the downtown, does it require matching funds?
Technically, no.
No, but it's strongly encouraged that the owner has some buy-in on it, just depending
I
on.
was reading from the plan and it didn't say anything about that, so I didn't know.
Yeah, with the flexible program, that's a good point. It's not required, but since it is really a discretionary pot of money, leverage would help a lot. With these other programs, not the economic development program, all the residential programs, pretty much, there's no match requirement. But I guess if you're constrained by that grant cap, then obviously other funds are gonna need to come from somewhere else. And we do require all those other funding sources to be secured up front with our application. Because these projects ultimately need to be ready to go once you have your grant agreement. Because there does need to be some beneficiary at the end, and we have a set amount of time to get this money spent. Not just from our end, but from how we report to HUD as well. So, yeah, all other funding secured up front and no match requirement for everything due in June. Good question.
Is the critical infrastructure also tied to the same timeline as formula or as allocation?
As in the amount of time you have to do the work.
No,
Or-
as in you apply in the year that you are applying for allocation.
Good question. No.
Okay,
If it's not your year to get that allocation funding, you can still apply for this critical infrastructure funding.
The neighborhood is tied.
the neighborhood
Yes.
is tied, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, that was an overview of those three programs or the applications due in June. I just want to touch on some dates concerning the applications themselves. This is where I'm going to ask Ben to talk for a quick second about the federal budget. So normally we would have had the exact amounts for all the allocation grants that each county and some cities will get. And
Yeah, so as you guys know, Congress just recently passed the fiscal year 24 budget for HUD on March 8th. So what that bill does is it gives HUD 60 days to get allocations out to entitlements and states. We have not yet received our allocation from HUD, which means that we cannot provide our allocations to our communities until we know for a fact how much we are actually going to get budgeted. We are operating right now under the assumption that because the bill did not reduce the amount of CDBG funding for HUD, we will get about the same amount that we got last year, which was just shy of 43 million. So the best thing that we can tell you right now is to assume that whatever your allocation was your last cycle is going to be the same for this cycle. We are also waiting on a new set of ACS data, which is what determines area-wide low and moderate income numbers. We're playing a little bit of cat and mouse. So if HUD gives us our allocations before they give us the ACS data, we would not be required to use the new ACS data for this program year. If they release the ACS data before they get us our allocations, they will most likely issue a policy notice that says it's effective immediately, which means that we would then have to load that data into our ocean system for you guys to apply, which will probably mean we will have to push the deadline for application back because we will need the time to do that lift and then test the system to make sure that all the data is coming out correctly. So we are in a little bit of a holding pattern right now, unfortunately, and I don't like being in that. Obviously, I want everything to be nice and laid out for us, but all I will say is just watch your emails for us to send out information once we have it on that. So the minute that we get our allocation from HUD, we will be able to post those allocation numbers. We'll send out an email blast. We'll get those posted to the TA site and you can operate as normal. I would still be looking for projects and making sure that you're teed up and ready to go, because if we can get our allocation by the 60-day deadline, we'll probably not be pushing that application period back. This has only happened, I think the way that this is happening now has only happened once before. We've often had issues where HUD doesn't have a funding bill until late in the cycle. This is the latest that it's happened. And in conjunction with that data, it's just created a lot of uncertainty. So I've been in contact with our HUD reps to see what's coming on that, and we'll let you know when we know.
Stay tuned. So we do have a cap on how many open grants each county or some cities may have open. So if you need us to come out and monitor and start the closeout process for any of those current grants, so you can close those out and have more applications available open, we ask people to do that by April 26th, just to give us enough time to work out that process. And then we'll open applications in Ocean on May 15th. So you'll have roughly a month after that to complete the applications. And then we will let everyone know when before we're gonna open those applications. June 1st, we do require pre-applications for everything that's not the allocation program. So for everything due in June, we do ask for the pre-applications by then. And then June 12th, that is a Wednesday, and those applications for allocation, neighborhood revitalization, and our critical infrastructure programs, those are due June 12th by 11:59 p.m. that night. So the system is open until then. I will not be working until 11:59 p.m. So if you have questions, I would ask you to do it before that morning. I'll be around. I usually stay a little later those days, but yeah, past 5, don't. I won't promise. Okay. And then this is the timeline for the grant project, or in your grant agreement itself. So your grant agreement will have a start date of September 1st, 2024. I will say if we do issue those out later than September 1st, that date will still be on there. And if you need to incur any kind of administrative costs, especially when you're doing your environmental review, you can go ahead and incur those costs and then reimburse with the grant funds after that, starting September 1st. Then, so you'll get 2 years to complete the project or projects in your grants. So that end date for the work itself will be August 31st. That is pretty much 2 years from that September 1st start date. Then after that, we have one more month after that. So that'd be September 30th, 2026. Wow, sorry, blurry. My end, not yours. That's our deadline for you to draw down all the funds in Ocean, and then you have 1 month after that, so that'd be Halloween or October 31st, 2026 to have those drawn funds paid out to your contractors or whoever else, and to get your final report in Ocean for the grant. And then after that, we'll come out and do a monitoring of the grant in some form and start the closeout process after that. So keep all your files on hand after that October 31st, 2026 date. But yeah, that's the timeline for each of these grants. 2 years to do the work, 1 more month to draw the funding down, and then 1 more month to pay out all the funds as you need to, and then do final reporting on the back end. I think that's pretty straightforward, but feel free to ask questions if you have them on that. So that was a bulk. Oh. Okay. Oh,
Okay,
what installings?
You answered that.
Oh, okay.
for critical infrastructure.
Oh, yeah, so the last sidewalk question we had was for the downtown
Yeah, flexible.
component. So yeah, the question is, would installing sidewalks on a street, qualify as critical infrastructure? That was it, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have done a comprehensive sidewalk project before. The critical component of it would be, is if it is absolutely critical in your service area. The one example I can think of off the top of my head was for an entire village needing sidewalks, and they proved that people really did need them throughout the area. There was low-income housing, seniors around there. The village had one grocery store, and that was the route to get there. We've seen other sidewalk programs, if it's limited, like you're only doing a few feet of sidewalk, I don't know how that would rate compared to other projects deemed critical in other applications, but yes, I mean, sidewalks are eligible under critical infrastructure, but it's up to you all to prove how it's critical and how your residents need it.
I would say network effect is what you're looking for there, like Jared said, like who are the folks that are there and what are they using? Another example I think we had was the post office was like the centerpiece of town, so everyone would walk to the post office. There were no crosswalks, there were no curb ramps or anything like that, so folks were walking in the street. If they were in wheelchairs or motorized scooters, they were having to go into traffic to go around to get into this, so they used critical infrastructure money to do accessible sidewalks and pathways for these individuals to get where they needed to go, so.
It is eligible, yes. All right, so now, so that was an overview of those programs. Now we're just gonna talk a few minutes about application tips and maybe a couple things about Ocean, our online grants management system itself for our office. So I will say, if you haven't logged into Ocean in a while, I would do that when you can to make sure you still have access. If not, let us know, we'll help you out with that. People like to test this way too late in June, and every year it's interesting, I'll say. So yeah, check if you have Ocean access, check if the right people have access to Ocean as well. Some people have the ability to start the applications, but not the submit button. So make sure you have Ocean access, and also use Google Chrome. Internet Explorer, we used to tell people to use that, but that's been made obsolete by now. You can use Microsoft Edge. I would just use Google Chrome. It'll have all the functionality you need. So yeah, check your Ocean account, make sure you have access and that the right people have the right user roles in Ocean for your community. Okay. So we do have checklists for all of our applications. There's quite a bit of overlap in each of the programs on what could be eligible for each of these programs. So rather than having a checklist for every single program where everything kind of looks the same, we put everything due in June, just on one master checklist, saying if this is the allocation grant you're applying for, then here's a checklist with everything that's required. Some of these forms on a checklist, we do have templates for, others we don't. We also note that on this checklist as well. This is on the technical assistance site. So in addition to each of the forms on this checklist, above that, it's a PDF file with, it's like 30 something pages, I think, but you only need a couple pages for the checklist. But let's say you have a question on what do you mean by a floodplain map? We have a quick blurb on what that means and how to do your floodplain map. Or what does it mean why do we need federal prevailing wages on this cost estimate? So if you have questions on each of these attachments or forms, we've got info on that. That's mostly what I want to say about this slide. So yeah, we have checklists. All this will be available soon on the technical assistance site. What do you think? Late April? We'll have this up?
Yes, the goal is to have it posted with the training webinar recording on, I think, the 26th.
Right.
Yeah.
Then for people doing the allocation program, we'll have a questionnaire or narrative for you to fill out for each of your programs, to explain what, or projects, I mean, to explain what they are. And then, let's just move on.
Okay.
Yeah.
What did your return of the narrative mean down there?
Yes, last year for the allocation stuff in Ocean, there's a box where you can say what your project is. So we were trying to cut as much forms as possible with all these applications.
Mhm.
So we asked people, hey, just put that narrative that we usually required in the past, just plug in a Notion. We didn't get a lot of info from that.
Limited.
So we got a lot of
Yes, I think.
Yeah.
2-word kind of project narrative. So now we, in comparison to last year, this year, we're gonna put in a questionnaire similar to our other programs, not allocation, as just to get the info on your projects. What it is, who benefits, how does it qualify? That's mostly it. So that's what that means.
Okay.
I will say, if you're coming in this year, you didn't have an application due last year. We took a lot of time last year to cut the application down. I think we removed about 1/3 of the documents that we required. So we've been trying to streamline things and make it a little less painful, because we know the document upload part is probably the worst part of Ocean. Having to click in there and upload 1 million documents is fun. And it's not fun for us to pull down 1 million documents either, so.
And I guess maybe I'll say, PDF files are great. Those upload much quicker in Ocean, I found, than other stuff, especially Word files. Or, Excel files, some of our required forms are in Excel form, so you can upload those as well. Excel files in macro form, Ocean doesn't like that. So, you'll have to save maybe a couple of those template forms differently. That's just an FYI. That stuff like that's also covered next week in our webinar we're doing statewide. But yeah, check those checklists for each of those applications due. You can reach out. Even with the, I'll say, competitive programs, you can reach out and ask us if things are required. Like, yeah, we can tell you yes or no on things, but things such as, hey, can you read over this narrative or how I answered these questions? We won't do that. But if there's anything we can say a yes or a no, like, hey, does the service area work? Yes, we can absolutely tell you ahead of time. That's a very yes or no kind of situation. Things that are a bit fuzzier in nature or subjective, I'm gonna tell you, I'm not gonna say anything. Another tip, maps. Every year we get ones that look like the top left. I've seen some from county engineers from the 70s that are highlighted or pen marks all over. We'll kick that back and tell you to try again. Ultimately, the idea is to be able to pick the map up and be able to go drive there. So we tell people, screenshots of Google Maps or Google Earth are perfectly fine. Let's say I'm gonna use Portsmouth as an example, just because we're right down the road from there. If you're doing something in a bigger area like Portsmouth or a bigger metro area throughout the state, and you want to do like a map of the entire city with a, I don't know, a star or wherever your project is, and then you want to put another map after that of a close-up of the site itself, that's fine. But yeah, something like a fuzzy black and white map that's been scanned 1 million times, please don't upload it. We will make you send us a new map. Maps matter.
I'm gonna add one note on that too, because service area maps especially to his point, if we can't tell what your boundaries are, then you can't match your beneficiaries to it with ACS data or even your income survey. So if we get something that is just, jagged lines kind of drawn around, but there's roads that it looks like the neighborhood got cut in half, or, the number of households doesn't seem to match the number that's on your income survey or something like that. If we are unable to determine whether your project is eligible, it's probably gonna get kicked out right off the bat. So location maps matter, service area maps matter even more. So make sure that you're being very precise when you get those to us about who is going to benefit from your project.
Yeah, that especially matters if your service area is much smaller compared to the entire place. So if you're doing something in Waverly, I guess, for example, without looking at the ACS data there, but it's really only one street, then yes, tell us where that part of that one street is on the map. Especially with the critical infrastructure program we found, where people use that smaller service area as a subset of the bigger area. Sometimes, especially if we can't tell that the project is qualified as LMI area-wide benefit, we can't move that forward. So that will help us out a lot to make sure that your project is eligible at the end of it. These are some other, I guess, general tips we'll touch on. I guess if you wanted to err more on the side of telling us more than less about your service area, how they're being impacted currently and their future benefit afterwards, I would say more is generally better. We've gotten some kind of limited narratives in the past on why the project needs to take place or how people are being benefited. So rather than just saying, hey, we need to repair this sidewalk just because the sidewalk question came up. Hey, we need to repair the sidewalk. Then we haven't really gotten much of why, or why that sidewalk is important to your service area, or how people could use that sidewalk, but they can't. So you all are the experts in your region, and we need you to tell us how your project will be impactful in your area. Even with stuff like the allocation program, where we're just vetting for basic eligibility, that will help us with those applications as well. Also with that, supporting documentation. It's one thing to say, hey, we have a service area that's being impacted by failing infrastructure here. But then I guess these claims seem to be kind of, I guess we would like to see a little more proof in some of these narratives if we're having to pick one project over another. So if there's a road, I guess you need to get repaired, and you say it's important, but there's no really supporting docs outside of that. It's kind of hard for us to judge that application against another application that does have a lot of supporting documentation or proof of how people are being impacted. So any kind of third-party stuff you can get, any kind of resident impact or input on projects, or letters from people would even help, or any other third-party input you can get to help us show that your project is critical, or this would help your target area in the neighborhood revitalization program, or anything else that would be very helpful. And I guess that goes with how your beneficiaries or your residents are being impacted, or even the business for economic development. I guess that ties into that as well. Then what we mean by proposed improvements and useful life is, so your project's completed, how long is the project going to last? And also, who's going to maintain that improved infrastructure? And also the condition of your failing infrastructure. What exactly is failing about it? How could it be better? I guess that does kind of dovetail into residential impact. But key details on the infrastructure itself, and that could be some technical detail or data that you might need from an engineer or something as well. Feel free to include that in the application as well. We see a lot of technical jargon with these applications. I do Google a lot. But yeah, any of that info and information that will help a lot.
Yeah, we're not engineers, but we do read engineering reports. Like we will read your documents if you provide them.
Definitely. And also, I mean, just to talk about critical infrastructure again, I mean, you have an identified need, you have an identified project. Do those go together? Does that project solve your identified need? We've had some cases where we've had a need, especially like flood drainage. We've had a couple of those come up recently where they say, here's our need and we're doing this project, but at the end of it, we can't really tell if you're fixing that need or not. So that clear connection that helps us to be able to select projects for funding since our funding is getting scarcer by the year. I also want to talk about budgets for a minute. We've had several applications come in where it comes into, we'll just say $100,000 for easy math. But then cost estimates and matching funds and everything, they don't add up to that $100,000. So how are you going to pay for that project if you don't have all the money lined up? We see that every year. Or having cost estimates broken out. So if you're applying for more than one activity, those cost estimates add up to those activities that you have in Ocean. That's another thing we see quite often. Any other notes on budget stuff?
Yeah, I would just say it's kind of comes down to also just triple checking your work. So we know that it's a lot to ask you guys to get the estimates from the engineers and then input it into Ocean. But if you get a cost estimate from an engineer that's telling you the project is $100,000 and then you put $99,000 in your application, like, yeah, we get it. Sometimes you might fat finger the number, or I know there's like this scroll issue with it, but just going back and checking that all of your numbers are accurate before you hit that submit button, because we will come back and ask. And if it's a competitive program like Neighborhood or Critical, you don't really get the option to fix that. Like we have to take that into account as we're reviewing. For allocation is more back and forth, but just that's all I would say.
Yeah. And that all your other funding sources, they're all committed in writing. So however that works with other state agencies or private match or local match, however that works, we do require all that upfront with the applications. I think that's it for that slide. Yeah, we can move on. And photos, we love to see photos, honestly. Especially, so if you're not able to get to sites every so often, but you're applying for something somewhere out in the county where you can't get to all the time, have your residents take photos. So these examples, we've got a broken, I think it's a clay water line on the left. The one in the middle, that's a brick falling from a downtown building. The building, the Green Bond building in Waverly. Yeah, I saw a lot of picks of bricks on the street in that application. That was for the flexible program. And then the last one, that's a flood and drainage project someone applied for. There's a lot of flooding in the area. So yeah, if you've got pictures, or let's say, especially this flood and drainage stuff, if you're applying because you have standing water that needs to get drained out, and then the pics are of the area sunny and 75 out, yeah, that doesn't help. So yeah, I guess I'm saying you can outsource taking photos or have people take photos in addition to your site photos you're taking. So yeah, feel free to have other people help you gather photos or support letters or other supporting documentation with your applications.
And do not use the Google Drive by images.
Yeah.
You get a lot of Google images from the street view. That's not acceptable. Some of those, especially in the more rural areas, are very outdated. We've had some that came in last year that were like 2009 photos. That does not accurately describe what you're coming to us for. So there's no more of those.
Yeah, we can tell. As soon as you send a Google Maps screenshot, we know. See, yeah, those were pretty much the tips I wanted to go over here. And then we did just a couple of quick resources after that. So yeah, so the consolidated plan, in other words, that's our annual plan. We have to send to HUD, say this is how the state will disperse its state CDBG funding. So that's where we write all of our parameters on these programs. So stuff like the rating criteria, or if you want more clarification on which or how a project qualifies under which program, you can look at that there. Any type of administrative costs and limits with that for each program, that's outlined in the consolidated plan as well. What else can I think of for that? Yeah, those are the three things I wanted to talk about with that. That's available on development's main website. It will say draft PY 2024 plan. Draft only means that we sent that to HUD. We're waiting on them to approve it and say, okay, go on, which I don't think that will be an issue. The middle link, that's our technical assistance site. So that's where we'll post all the application materials and recording of the webinar we'll do next week, and a video file of that webinar as well. We're gonna post the question and answer stuff there as well, right? Yeah. Next week, people are gonna send in more questions during that webinar, so we'll put a summary of all those questions and answers there as well. The last link is HUD's basically CDBG guide. I use this quite often still. It's a great link for very concise, clear information on anything CDBG. So you've got a question with the allocation program, I guess, on like, hey, how do I qualify this limited clientele project? What is limited clientele? That's a great resource. I guess first email me and I can tell you this as well. But, or if you're new and you just want like an overview on what CDBG is, this is a great resource to bookmark. So that's that link. Then the last resource I put on here is our contact info. This is for statewide stuff. Anything in gray, they are entitlement community, so they get their own HUD funding and report directly to HUD. Otherwise, we're the state CDBG program, and these are all of our program reps. I'm the one in blue on the bottom. I'm more of a green person in person, but I'm blue here.
Right.
Didn't get pick his color.
Yeah. So yeah, that's our contact info. Do we have questions in the chat? Do we have questions in the room? Anybody want to comment about the solar eclipse? Anybody not see it? Okay. Well, yeah, so that's my email address. I do also have a phone. I guess I could have put that up there. We can send that out afterwards as well. Yeah, feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions, especially on if you need to figure out how to qualify a project, or hey, does the scope of work qualify, or if you have questions on the upcoming ACS data and if that's going to change, or anything else. I'm around. And so is Ben, but I'm around. Other than that,
No, on the new ACS data, will you guys send out a notification on that, or what?
definitely.
Yeah, so we take HUD gets the data from census, HUD does some stuff with it, and then we actually manipulate it a little bit to make it fit our system better. We'll generate all those maps, and the list that we'll send out to you. The ACS data is in 5-year chunks. So the one that we're using right now is 2011 to 2015. The new data will be 2016 to 2020. So that was completed in the middle of the pandemic. So it's going to be interesting to see what that data set looks like. But HUD's always kind of behind the ball on like the most recent data set, so we're running usually like 4 or 5 years behind.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for coming out. Thanks for joining us online. Feel free to reach out if you have questions, and we'll post everything for next week's webinar on the technical assistance site, and we'll email blast all that info out.
And we'll do the same for this training. We'll put it on our website. We'll send out Q&A and we'll have it available as soon as we get it edited. So, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you guys for coming down.
Yeah, thanks for coming over. Almost said down.
Like I said, I haven't seen you guys